Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Basu and Godin Notebook on this Friday, December 15th. I am Marc-Antoine Godin. And Arpin Basu, we are excited because the Islanders are coming to play in Montreal tomorrow night.
Most exciting team in the NHL.
Yeah.
Love me some Islanders hockey. So
any day, man.
Fun.
Any day. I love it.
So fun. I don't know. The Kings are giving them a run for their money, to be called the most exciting team in the NHL. I mean, the Kings win. So
they have a true recipe
the Islanders
win.
but the Islanders are winning of late. So I mean, it's hard to argue with victories. I mean,
I know.
Actually, I don't know. I don't know if Canadiens fans would be willing to play like an utterly boring, sterile brand of hockey if it meant more wins.
That's a great question.
I wonder. Yeah. Well, let's if you're watching this on YouTube, leave comments on that to that effect, or whether that's a trade-off you'd be willing to make. But I feel like Montreal fans have always wanted to win with some flair and some entertainment value. Pizzazz, yeah. And I think Martin St. Louis believes in that to some extent too. He wants to play an exciting brand of hockey. I mean, he doesn't really have the horses to do it right now, but I don't think he would ever. And I don't even think management. I don't think Ken Hughes or Jeff Gorton would advocate for a boring, sit back and wait sort of counterattacking style that would. Even if it produced more victories, and honestly, it'll be interesting to see once the Kings reach the playoffs if they can win with that style. When most of the rest of the league kind of does play a more of an up-tempo brand,
yeah.
And hopefully they don't, because that'll mean there will be copycats, and we will have teams starting to incorporate that into their DNA, and we don't want that.
No, of course, that would be more snooze fests would turn into the league wondering what can we do to increase offense, and then all sorts of gimmicks would be added to the game just because the LA Kings. But I don't think we have to be concerned too much with the Islanders about that. They're on a winning streak, but I don't know, man. To me, this week the St. Louis Blues canned their head coach. And I mean, okay, that's fine. At some point, I spoke to Jake Allen about Craig Berube, and he said, I really like this guy. And he was, I guess you win a cup with a coach, you have a bond with that guy forever. But apart from the coach, you look at the lineup, and it's a sort of team just like the Islanders, where I feel like they are who they are, and they don't have a lot of room to grow. And they might peak. I don't see the Islanders getting that much better from, considering where they are with their payroll, with the resources they've got there in the farm and whatnot. The Islanders, the Blues, the Calgary Flames, although they have a few younger players, but those teams are like,
yeah, I mean,
good luck to those who were listening to this instead of watching it on YouTube, but that's okay. I think you're
yeah. I mean, that's fair. And then I think Lou Lamoriello wants to win sooner than later. I don't think he wants to do this job for the rest of his living life. But yeah, sometimes you just have to go with the personnel you've got.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what. That's what the Canadiens have to do. And so we've reached a point here, kind of a critical mass of injuries and circumstances that have led to, we're anticipating, based on practice on Friday, that Jesse Ylönen is going to get a bit of a promotion up the lineup. And it's kind of the second time, if I'm not mistaken. He had the game in Boston where he was up in the top six.
For 2 periods.
For 2 periods, exactly. Well, that game was such an unmitigated disaster that something had to give. And now here we are. He's going to get another opportunity, seemingly, on Saturday. And on defense, we have no one. He's not being elevated, but the fact he's even playing in the NHL. We have Jayden Struble, a young man who's who's kind of carving out his place and his, under the current circumstances, to the extent where Arbor Jacki is going to have what looks like at this point a bit of an extended run in Laval. Marty mentioned back when he was sent down that Struble's play has nothing to do with it. Maybe that's true. Maybe there are legitimate concerns the Canadians have with Jacki's game that they want him to sort out in Laval, because it was a theme all season with him, talking about his defensive play, defending against the rush, some D-zone stuff. It's something that Jacki has been talked to about all season and was talking about prior to his injury. So, but even though he says it's unrelated, and even if they need Jacki to work on these things, that move is made easier by the fact that Jayden Struble has had a seamless sort of introduction to the lineup and has not given them any reason to take him out. So today we're going to talk about these two kind of in parallel, because it strikes us that this is kind of the sort of things you want to see when with the Canadians being at the point of their development that they are. You want to see younger guys forcing Martin St. Louis' hand a little bit and making it difficult to keep them either down in the lineup or out of the lineup altogether. But they're two very different cases, and they're pretty unique. And so I think we should start with Ylönen, because he was practicing with Josh Anderson and Sean Monahan,
but he was there because Jake Evans had yet another therapy day, and he might not play against the Islanders.
Right.
But all this it was more of a placeholder. If Evans is there, Ylönen's going to play on the fourth line.
Yes. So for now, let's just talk about Ylönen moving up the lineup, because I think a lot of the fans would like to see this, and I think the Canadians would like to see it at some point. Martin doesn't seem all that convinced, and so this is obviously, if Evans can't go, this would be an opportunity for Ylönen, and I think we mentioned it in a previous episode how I had kind of given Ylönen the out that the one time he was given this opportunity, the team play was so awful that maybe it wasn't fair to evaluate him on that one thing. And Martin disagreed and said, you're always being evaluated. So he seemed that Ylönen's performance in Boston seemed to resonate to some extent with Martin. He keeps talking about his play away from the puck, both offensively and defensively. And, what do you think of that? Because it doesn't strike me as something that's overly problematic when I watch him play. But it really is every time Martin's asked about him, that's what he brings up. What do you think he's seeing that we're not?
Well, first, I think that he's being a bit harsh on him, because if there are details in his play away from the puck that he doesn't like, Ylönen is certainly not the only guy on the team that has those struggles.
No.
So that's the first thing.
His potential line mate, his potential opposite winger on Saturday night has a lot of them. So
exactly. So, and it's called details, right? Details of his play away from the puck. It's not necessarily a guy. Josh Anderson the other day had a very, very bad read on the play where I think it was Caden Cooley who had committed to join the rush, and it was Anderson's responsibility, to just go back a little bit and protect the blue line offensively, and he did not do that at all, and it turned into an odd man rush and into a goal against. So that was a very, very bad play away from the puck. So it's not as if, and I have not seen Ylönen do so blatant mistakes. I think there are things like, is your positioning generally opening eyes to the opponent and helps them in transition and gaining the zone or things like that? Is it your stick maybe that is placed on the run side or is not positioned well so that you would have the chance to intercept the pass and you don't do it, and then it creates a scoring chance or simply a shot on net? could be many things. It could be your positioning also when, how Marty talks about being balanced on the ice, making sure that, they're not. I think that's a point that Ylönen himself brought up and said, I know that the coach wants that, and he might have heard something about it too. But I think overall, it places, like in a situation like this, the coach has a decision between two things that he can do. The first one is to say, we're a rebuilding team, and I have this young player who's somewhat promising. I'm going to teach him the hard way how I want him to do, how I want him to do things. And once he's applied it properly, then I'm going to give him some more leeway, some more opportunities and whatnot. That's the first way, the first way of doing it. The other one would be to say, we're a rebuilding team, and I've got this guy who's got some kind of potential. So let's give him a lot of leeway, chances to make all sorts of mistakes that he will learn from. And he'll correct it through repetitions. He'll correct himself, and he's going to clean up these things from his game. And obviously, Marty so far with Yesse Ylonen has decided to do the first option, but he hasn't necessarily decided to do that same option with every guy. That's why it's so it's so obvious with Ylonen, because you take a guy like Barron, for example, on defense. He gave him the second type of opportunities, and Barron, to a certain extent, ran with it. So
he's getting to play through a lot of mistakes. I mean, Barron is playing through a lot of mistakes right now and is not losing his position at all.
No. So Ylonen is the one guy that had the smallest leash on any player in the Montreal Canadiens. So,
but what I find interesting about that, the Barron comparison is interesting because Barron also had some issues that he needed to clean up, and he was given this treatment. He started the season out of the lineup. He was sent to Laval last season at certain points, and the whole reason for it was to clean up his defensive zone play. Remember, he was on the penalty kill before he was put on the power play, and the reason Marty gave for that was that they want him to focus on his defensive play. And Barron said that helped him. It did help him. And he did, by and large, for a certain point, clean up his defensive zone play and was playing much better. Recently, he's been prone to mistakes. He's made a bunch. But he appears to have gained a certain benefit of the doubt because of that stretch where he showed improvement. Yeah. And so he showed what his top end play or his peak kind of play could look like, and it looked very good. Recently, both him and Gouli have had their share of struggles. You could blame one or the other for the other's struggles if you choose. I think Gouli himself recognizes that he's going through a bit of a rough patch. He called it the first one he's had, but they're getting that benefit of the doubt. And if you remember, you think back to the beginning of training camp, right after the Canadiens acquired Tanner Pearson, and Marty was asked, to what extent do you allow a veteran's track record to trump a young player's potential?
Yeah.
And he said, well, that track record or that body of work, was what he used, shows that you have some consistency. And consistency is what I'm after. And so that consistency and that proof that you can be a consistent player will get you some benefit of the doubt. So you're seeing it with Josh Anderson.
With Joel Armia?
With Joel Armia to some extent, obviously. Aside from the trips down to Laval, he definitely gets some benefit of the doubt, and he rewards it on occasion. Yeah. When you get a good Joel Armia game, it's good. It's noticeable, and so But
those two veterans are not necessarily guys that shine with consistency, in their play.
Absolutely not. No. And I mean, Anderson used to. He's not this season for sure, but he's generally been a pretty consistent player. I mean, it's he goes through dry spells scoring wise, but you can generally say, well, if he doesn't score, he'll get in on the forecheck. He'll be physical.
Mhm.
He'll generate scoring chance. He'll get the odd breakaway, like none of which are happening right now. None of those things. I mean, so it's not only is he not scoring goals, he's not doing any of those other things that he normally does. So he's been kind of consistently bad of late. And so this is a case where if Evans is in fact able to go, and perhaps by the time many of you are listening to this, we'll have the answer to that. But right now, as of mid Friday afternoon, we don't know. It would be appropriate for Anderson to go down to the fourth line and Ylönen to get a shot in that spot.
Yeah.
But we both know that that's not how that will go down. And maybe there is some benefit to that because knowing what good Josh Anderson is, like there should be, I know we've reached a point where it's almost, we're verging on half a season. Like it's almost Christmas, for crying out loud. So there's only so much runway even a veteran should be allowed based on their body of work. But there's also something to be said for allowing a young player to build a body of work. And that's something that Martin has been a little hesitant with Ylönen to allow him to do, because the flashes we see, aside from the shootout moves and whatever, but those hands get applied in different situations. And if he has more chances to touch the puck, and which is what Marty's talking about with him, if he improves his play away from the puck, he'll get more touches and he can apply those skills that we see that are so obvious as a result of that. But it's hard to do that when you don't get a shot.
No, and the other thing is that there are so many guys that are struggling on this team that fans look at that and say, oh, well, if only we could, Marty was to, either give a lesson to a certain player or demote him to a lower line or make an example out of a player. But in order to do that, you need to have guys that can take these players' place. Mm-hmm. And the pool of players that are the alternatives is minimal right now. Actually, Ylonen is the only one.
No, I think Heineman's
but Heineman is here for now. But barring like another rash of injuries, he's going to go down again. Heineman is meant to get his fair shot later in the season because he has not, in the evaluation of the team, he hasn't had enough of a runway since he came back from his injury to really establish himself as a first-line player in the AHL, prove that he could score regularly. Eventually, it's going to happen, but I think that it's more to help the team than to help Heineman on a very circumstantial basis that he's been called up this time. But if 2 months from now, in a subsequent call-up, I think it would be a different story. But I agree with you that down the road, before the end of the season, Heineman will also be a guy like that who's there to push the others and say, you know what, if you're not doing the job, we've got a kid that's ready to do it. So, because Anderson, could definitely be a guy that could be put lower down the lineup, although Marty doesn't seem to think that playing a hard ball against him is the way to go, because he recognizes that he's working hard, and he says as long as the player believes in himself, I'll keep believing in him.
Yeah, it's questionable right now. I mean, it's
But Armia has received quite a bit of time on the third line, certainly more than Ylönen. Before his injury, Tanner Pearson had a better shot than Ylönen. So, you need to use a kid like that to, even despite all of his warts and his mistakes, you need to give him a chance, not only for his own development, but also to increase the level of accountability among the group of forwards. Because you don't have many guys like that can do that.
Yeah, and so that's the thing, but it's also, it goes back to the original point. Like, we're in a rebuild.
Yeah,
let's see what It's one thing if the veterans are clearly outperforming what the kids might potentially do, but when they're not, and when you've given those veterans a more than fair chance to show you that they can provide more, then. Because I get your point on Heineman that this is circumstantial, and that in an ideal world they would have let him play in Laval longer, coming off the injury that he was coming off of. And again, just last week we were talking about how he's struggling with his timing, and there's literally really basic core components of his game that he was trying to find in Laval.
Yeah.
But right from training camp, had circumstances been different then, he might have made this team out of training camp. I think that the organization, has a lot to learn about this player, but they're intrigued for sure. The physicality and just the shot, the offensive instincts, like there's a lot. The size, so he's a bigger guy. There's a lot they like about him.
Willingness to go inside.
And ability to win board battles, which we don't know if he has that at the NHL level. Largely, we have not seen him too much at the NHL level. So I get, I hate discounting how invested all these players are in trying to win every game, and how a lot of people will say, well, who cares? Like, just let's play the kid and let's see what he can do. No, there's a room full of players who, if you're putting in a player who they feel is not as worthy or not as good as the player he's replacing, there's an equilibrium to maintain there. But when you're replacing a player who has yet to score on a goaltender, close to 30 games into the season, it's, the opposite effect could take hold in the room. Like, geez, if I hadn't scored a goal by now, would I have been given this much time to do it? There is something to be said for the other side of it, where a player's giving too much of an opportunity to find his game. I don't know if we're there with Josh Anderson, but you listen to him talk, and it's just like, and you even just watch the body language on that shootout attempt against Pittsburgh, and it's clear that he's in a dark kind of a dark place with his game right now. He's trying to keep his spirits up and what have you, and he's working hard to try and come out of this funk. But that game against Pittsburgh was just, not only did he miss those two golden opportunities to score, but it's just like little things where he's missing assignments, he's missing defensive assignments, offensive assignments, he's just not in the right place. It's just like there's all these elements of his game. Marty loves talking about the hockey as rules, and if you follow the rules, you'll get, like, Josh Anderson is not following the rules. He's just not.
No, we had an episode recently called Josh is Back, because we were referring to what Marty had said about him.
Yeah.
But it seems like instead of being motivated and able to break through following his empty net goal, he dialed back his play. So he's been looking worse in the last 4 or 5 games than he had in the previous 5.
I mean, yeah, we should tag this episode "Old Takes" or "Cold Takes Exposed" or "Old Takes Exposed." I don't know, but so that was because the last game I was like, "Josh is back" is a quote that is really not aging well. Like, it's just not. And I feel like that was that after the Florida game? I don't know if it was the game. I don't know if he said that after he scored in the empty net, or was it?
No. That was 3-4 games before that.
Before that, because it was the Florida game where he came out trying to kill everyone, right? Like that was the old Josh Anderson. Yeah, and we had played
Columbus the night before, and he had a good game in Columbus too. So those two together made Marty say he's back.
Josh is back, exactly. Well, he's not, and so it's and the thing that's so puzzling about it is that he can go do that. That's within his control. Like, if he wants to go out and be a menace, forechecking and just skating all over the ice and hitting people, like, he can go do that. There's nothing stopping him from doing that other than his own willingness to do it. And for like one game, basically, we saw him do it, and it was like, I remember tweeting during that game, like, this, he hasn't been there in a while, but this is what Josh Anderson looks like in the playoffs. Like, if you want an idea of what Josh Anderson could bring without scoring a goal in the playoffs, this is it. We're seeing it, and haven't seen it since. So,
Yeah, and as a side note to that, since we're on Josh Anderson for a few minutes, what did you think of the response of the crowd before his shootout attempt? Because he received like a
standing ovation, and it was back-to-back standing ovations for Brendan Gallagher and him.
Right. And we've heard so many players. I think Saku Koivu was the first to say that. Saku Koivu and Craig Rivet were the best examples of that. But they used to say Montreal is the best place to play when you win, suggesting that when you don't, it's tough.
It could be bad. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or Steve Shutt. The Montreal crowd is behind you. Win or draw.
Win or draw.
Yeah,
I love that too. Yeah, you're right. He was probably the OG.
He was the original. One. Yeah, he was the OG. Yeah.
But the sort of encouragement that Josh Anderson got from the crowd goes a little bit in the opposite of that. There's a level of empathy and true partisanship and encouragement that's really notable from the Montreal players, because from the Montreal fans, because remember that back in the day, Scott Gomez did not receive close to that treatment.
Oh my God, no.
So
it was the opposite treatment. Yeah,
yeah. So it's I thought it was neat. It
I did too. I thought it was, and what was cool about it is that the crowd felt that they could have an impact on the game. Like had Josh scored, it was giving the Canadiens a chance to win the game, and so. So yeah, they tried to do that. It didn't work. Let's just put it that way. I mean, if anything, I think it increased the pressure on. Like he did not look like a guy who was very confident going into that shootout attempt. So, it's a tough one, I think, for Marty. I mean, I think he mentioned the other day how. He's not considering scratching Josh. That was when he mentioned, if he believes in himself, then I'm going to believe in him kind of thing, paraphrasing. Yeah. But it's reaching a point where you might have to try something different and do something.
That's why we go back to Ylönen.
That's it. Ylönen provides that opportunity, to do something different with him.
Because Mitchell Stephens is not going to provide that. Michael Pizzetta is not going to provide that. The other options are extremely limited. So, yeah.
Aside from Heineman.
Except from Heineman. Yeah. So, how would you, apart from Anderson, how do you see the way that Ylönen could be used to best develop him and have him...
I mean, I think we saw it at the start of the season when he was being incorporated into the penalty kill. I mean, that was a way for Marty to say, okay, we need you to do these things. We need you to improve these elements of your game. And it's actually very similar to Barron. They put him on the penalty kill, said, okay, this is going to allow you to improve those areas of your game. And maybe they didn't see enough improvement. And that's why he was taken off the penalty kill eventually. And that's why he's had trouble going up the lineup. And maybe these are things that Ylönen just can't do. Maybe he's not able to incorporate these elements of his game, and maybe then it's going to be a standoff. But it's just I guess the point is that there is this situation in your current top 6, top 9, whatever, but there is this player who's not doing any of those things that you're asking Jesse Ylönen to do, and he's playing regardless in that spot. Yes, he has yes, he has a history. Yes, he has a track record. He has a body of work, whatever you want to call it. Ylönen does not, but there's only there's limits to the benefit of doubt you can give a veteran, and they do need to not even produce, but just play within the parameters that you're asking all your players to play within. Anderson's not doing that. So if Ylönen's not doing that, then let's see if he could do it with more runway. Let's see if he could do it with better line mates, the type of line mates that Anderson's had all season. Let's see. And so we shall see. We'll see on Saturday. But if it doesn't happen on Saturday, the Canadiens are heading out on the road after that for their final 3 games before the Christmas break, and there'll be an opportunity, except that's the thing, is that if it doesn't happen on Saturday, Marty's not going to be more willing to try that on the road. If anything, he'd be less willing to try it. So We'll see what happens. So the other guy we want to talk in this vein of a young player getting an opportunity and grabbing onto it, because if Ylönen does get that opportunity, let's not kid ourselves, he better have a really good game because it's obvious that he's not going to get lots of runway, and he's not going to get a chance to get another game in that spot if he doesn't play well on Saturday, if indeed he gets elevated to a top six role. Struble has been in that situation and has given the Canadians absolutely zero reason to take him out of the lineup. And what's not funny, but it's striking how Martin appreciates those elements of Struble's games. The elements that he wants to see from Ylönen, he's seeing them from Struble. How he likes his touches, he likes his positioning, where he's going on the ice. All the things that Marty always harps on seem to be there in Struble's game.
It's got good breakouts.
It's got excellent breakouts. And he's got good instincts. He's joined the rush when it's appropriate. He has not gone out of his way to show the physical side of his game, which is actually a stark contrast from Jackai's introduction to the NHL. You know, I mean, he got caught going out of his way to physically kill people because that's an asset he has. Well, Struble has that same asset. And he has resisted the temptation. And I asked him about it today, and he was just like, has it been hard to not want to show that side of your game? Like, that side of your game is what could keep you in the NHL ultimately. And he said, no, not really. It hasn't been hard at all. You know, I'm just trying to play, and I'm going to wait for my spots, but I'm not out there to go and show that I can be a physical force necessarily. I want to go out there and show that I can play the game. And so it's a great mindset that he has, because he can be a nasty dude, you know, like he's got that nastiness in his game, and we haven't really seen it that much because he's trying to focus on the appropriate things and the things that I think the coaching staff is really appreciating about his game.
Yeah, but you know, I was there when you asked him that. Then you referred to Caden Gooley, who who displayed plenty of nastiness in juniors, and he's taken a step back when he arrived in the NHL, and he intends to gradually bring it back as he gets the other parts of his game settled down and working properly before he starts chasing after guys. But the difference between the two is that Gooley's a bigger guy. Struble is strong, but he's not that big. And I think that the size, everybody, the word that keeps coming out of everybody's mouth when it comes to Struble is he's an athlete. The athleticism is really what stands out with him. And he's a strong kid, but he's not the biggest kid. And I think that's where, from the NCAA to the NHL, there might be a margin, and there are certain things in the toughness aspect of his game. I'm not entirely sure that he's going to be able to translate that to the NHL.
Oh, I disagree. You don't have to be physically huge to hit people. We've seen lots of examples of guys like Francois Beauchemin, for instance. Not a big guy, but he had a mindset. He would punish guys. Frankie Bouillon, not a big guy, would punish guys. I mean, it's in your nature. It's something that's in you that allows you to do that. And I think that's in him. And I think it was, he agreed when I said, this is an element of you that's important. And he's like, yeah, it is. And so I don't think he has to be physically tall, because honestly, strength wise, it's there. It's just his height that doesn't make him all that big. I think once he feels comfortable enough to do it, I've talked to Caden about this a lot, and it's, the fact is, and the same thing applies to Struble, even coming from the AHL to the NHL, which is a bit less of a leap. But in Gooley's case, he was coming from the WHL to the NHL, and this whole thing was, I have to make sure I can line it up. All of these players are faster, they're better, they're more skilled, they don't skate with their head down. I'm not going to catch them unaware. I have to create my own bearings for when it's appropriate for me to really lay into a guy. And we're seeing it a little bit. And honestly, he didn't deny the possibility that him wanting to do that more often is what's leading to him getting beat one on one a little bit more frequently now than he was earlier in the season and definitely last season. But in Struble's case, what's interesting to me is you look at his ice time. His season high was against the Kings at home.
minutes.
16:48. Right. 16:48. Against the Penguins, he was at 13:58. You go down the line, there's been 3 games above 14 minutes, including the 16:48. Most of the time, he's between 10 and 13, roughly. Yeah. So, we had the question in the mailbag on Friday about Ylönen, right? Is he a product of his limited usage? Is that what makes him look more effective? I asked Kovacevic about Struble, and what he said is he's so impressed with is that Struble's able to perform despite getting those sporadic usage, particularly later in the game when he'll get a shift after sitting on the bench for 5-6 minutes sometimes, or a period where there's a lot of special teams, and all of a sudden he has to jump out there and he's performed well. And he said, Kovacevic said, that's a lot harder than playing too much, than playing 22 minutes and facing tough opponents. Like, that is what impresses me the most about that kid, is he's able to do that. And
yeah, because you cannot find your rhythm if you're cold and you have to wait every 4 or 5 minutes before you jump on the ice again. Getting into a rhythm, it becomes very, very difficult.
And especially when you're someone in Struble's position who is trying to prove himself in the NHL and trying to show the Canadians what they have in him. The temptation would be so strong. Like, that's why that's why I went into that line of questioning about him wanting to show the nastiness in his game, is that you have so few opportunities to show your dimension, right? The famous Trevor Timmins term, like he was drafted for that. Remember Mark Bergevin, Trevor Timmins talking about Struble when they drafted him, that nasty element of him, and the athleticism that you mentioned is the big reason why they drafted this kid. So he's shown incredible maturity and discipline to not want to show that every shift, not go out on the ice and be like, I'm going to blow someone up on this shift. So they see that I have that. He hasn't done that. And it's been,
he's tried to play a clean game, just in terms of execution.
He's succeeded.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But he's averaging 12:45 a game. Would his game be as clean if he was playing 16 or 17 minutes?
Oh, that's it.
Most
I don't
likely
think so.
Against better competition.
I don't think so. That's the thing. And that's the question with Ylönen right now. And that's why I asked Marty after practice on Friday, like, do you believe certain players have a ceiling of ice time? And he talked about windows and how, yes, some players do have windows that you don't want to exceed. But he said, I'm always hoping that they show me that they deserve more than the window that I've put on them, or that they deserve more than their window, which basically means the window that he's determined they have. And so, I think Kovacevic is an example of a guy, like, once he got out of that window, there were a few games he played with Mike Matheson. I think it was in late October. I'm just looking at it now. He's had a couple of games at around 23 minutes, but, once he got elevated to that kind of a somewhat top pairing role, it didn't look as good. Yeah, it was too much. And, Struble's not close to that. I mean, obviously, when you're averaging less than 13 minutes as a defenseman, there's obviously more room in that window for you to go get. But at his age, at his level of development, it's wouldn't necessarily be wise to start feeding him more minutes just because he's doing well with the minutes he has right now. Like, it has to be an incremental sort of thing. And I think that maybe applies to both guys that we're talking about here. Like, Struble is good with the usage right now, and he's showing that he's able to play those few minutes, which a lot of not just Kovacevic, but a lot of NHL players have told me that's difficult. It's a very difficult thing to do. Ylönen has a chance to show, maybe will have a chance to show that his window needs to be widened. And it's going to be on him to show it. But, Struble is just not there yet, even though as impressive as he's looked. It's interesting to me, like on a long-term basis, if this continues the way it has, because he's played, 12 games, I believe?
Overall, 11.
11. So it'll be his 12th on Saturday. So it's a small sample. So it's too early to start talking about where he fits in the grand scheme of things for the Canadians. Harris practiced today for the first time, joined his teammates for practice, is maybe a little more than a week or a week and a half away from returning at this point. At which point a decision is going to have to be made, right? and this is the eternal thing, is like, who's ahead in the pecking order, and it's always Struble, Harris, Xhekaj. Those are the three guys that come up. Xhekaj's in Laval. I don't think that means anything in terms of long term. Struble's showing what he's showing, and frankly, he had become kind of a forgotten man in the Canadian system. So good on him for reintroducing himself into this conversation. And then you have Harris, who doesn't really have that dimension.
No, but he was trusted by the coach to go out there, though. He was playing more than 18 minutes a night.
Yeah. So, well, because he's a guy who does like everything well, right? Like he does, without having that one dimension, he has like kind of an all-around good package.
That's it. So if you go, if you ignore the fact that a guy might be the flavor of the month, albeit in a very limited role, you bring back a guy like Jordan Harris, who's earned the trust of Martin St. Louis. He's not a veteran, but we can apply the same logic that he's been saying earlier in the year regarding Tanya Pearson versus a guy like Ylönen. It's that, give me the guy who's got a bit of track record, and I'm going to be willing to give him more the benefit of the doubt. So unless, what would be significant for me would be if they said to Jordan Harris, let's go, just go in Laval for a conditioning stint. And they buy themselves 10, 14 days more just so that they can play Struble a little bit more before Harris comes back in the lineup. That would be a big, big win for Struble. But we'll see. Though right now, the one thing that's helped Struble is the fact that he's a left defenseman, and he pushed out of the lineup a right-handed defenseman because David Savard, a right-handed defenseman, was coming back. Now you're going to have Harris, who's a lefty. He can play both sides, but he's a lefty.
Yeah.
He'll be ready to come back. Xhekaj at some point will raise his hand and say, hey, I'm ready to come back. He's a lefty too. So that's his competition right now. And I don't expect Struble to come out of this competition, at least this season, as the winner among those three.
Yeah.
But it's already a win for the organization that the guy has stepped up and made sure that he would be reminded to everybody, and that he's quickly becoming a lot more than I don't know if it's too harsh to say, but the somewhat fading prospect that he was late in his college career, because he had... Huh?
When a player is a senior in college... It's because there's question marks about him, it's really
Jordan Harris was a senior,
but he was
dominating.
And not only that, but the Canadians wanted to sign him. He wanted to graduate. That's different. It's I think Struble was not a case where he had to kind of fend off the Canadians. It was a case of the Canadians evaluating it. It was different, I think, in his case. Jordan Harris said the day he was drafted that he intended on graduating from college. So, it's so I think to say he was a fading prospect is fair. He's a second round draft pick, but when you hit your fourth year of college, you're not really front of mind when prospects are being discussed. Harris was, obviously, and there was the whole possibility of him signing elsewhere. How real that was or not, I don't think it was all that real, but I definitely Kent Hughes coming in was a help in that regard. I guess Struble also had the same opportunity. He kind of talked about it today, how that never really entered his mind. But yeah. And I think it's the one thing that's kind of telling about Struble also, and Marty kind of touched on it, where he's like, you got to be careful about putting young players in a box. And he feels the Canadians are good at not doing that. But there's something to be said about a player who's in the NCAA, which is a very kind of specific hockey environment, and that maybe his game is better suited to the pro game. And I think that's what we're seeing with Struble. And even he kind of said, yeah, it might be. And that's something you have to consider when you're watching NCAA players. I mean, it applies to junior too, but NCAA players, it's not as physical a game, and it's not, so I don't want to say keep that in mind in terms of Lane Hutson, but keep that in mind in terms of Lane Hutson is that it's a vastly different game. And listen, we're likely to see Hutson at the end of the season, whether it's in Laval or Montreal or what have you, but I would imagine he's going to sign at the end of the season. And so he might need some time to adjust to that is, I guess, my only point.
Struble told me about Hutson today. He said he's gross.
Yeah, that's good.
Just because, that was the first word that came out of his mouth when he mentioned,
gross.
The offensive prowess of Lane Hutson. He's gross.
Yeah, I like that. Honestly, I watch Lane Hutson play and I think of Barry Sanders. Like every time I watch him, that's the guy that comes to mind. Wrong sport, but just this crazy, elusive guy who can like make his body do all sorts of different things. It's the thing about Barry Sanders is that his body seemed to be able to move in two directions at once. Like his shoulders would go one way while his feet were going the other, and that's what made him so difficult to tackle. And that's Lane Hutson to me. And you see some of his kind of shoulder fakes, head fakes, all that stuff, and it's like if you're not paying attention to what his feet are doing, then you're going to get lost. And it'll be exciting if we see him in Montreal. We'll see what happens, but
there's a horde of young left-handed defensemen in the organization right now. We mentioned a few already. I mean, we could add Engstrom eventually to the list, and but when it came to convincing guys or agreeing with guys like Harris and Struble to sign pro contracts, they looked at the depth chart and say, okay, well, where's my opportunity exactly? And Struble said, I thought no matter where I ended up, I would still have to prove myself and find myself a spot. But Kent Hughes said, you present it to these guys, say, you'll have to earn a spot, but worst that can happen is that, you could be traded, but you always have the opportunity to showcase yourself and find a way. It might not necessarily all be with us, but you sign with us and we'll give you an opportunity to get in the NHL. And so one or if not more of those guys will end up on other teams at some point, but the Canadians will have given them a window at least to show the rest of the league what they're capable of doing.
And they have all the. I mean, it's going to be tricky over the next couple of years with all these guys because Gooley and Matheson aren't going anywhere on the left side at least. So now you have this potential logjam of Jackeye, Struble, Harris, Hutson, Engstrom, not so distant a future.
And the Canadians are not completely discount William Trudeau.
William Trudeau, Norlander. I mean, there's there's a lot.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that these guys accumulate value from a trade perspective? How do you ensure that you're evaluating them properly so that you wind up keeping the best of the group and making sure that you're doing that? And B, playing them enough, either in Laval or in Montreal, and getting each of them like a taste of Montreal if they're playing in Laval, to show the rest of the league that these are guys that you could insert into your top. Don't have room for them. You should send us a forward that we could use because we don't have that many of them. So it's going to be a dance, over the next little while to make sure that they do that. Whoever they decide is their guy or guys in that group, they're going to have to make sure that the other guys get seen enough around the league and that they could bring in a return that could help the Canadians up front, because I don't think we need to remind anyone the Canadians currently have the lowest scoring forward group in the NHL. So it's definitely a need. You look at this Canadians team up and down the organization, and there's a definite lack of oomph at forward. And so whether that's through their own drafted players, but really the surplus that they have on defense can help address that at some point.
I'm not sure if they're going to be able to have the right assessment on each and every of those guys before they have to make a decision. Yeah. There might be an element of risk in that, but man, I would crank up the internal competition like nobody's business. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't do the job, you have 5 games, and then somebody else, might take some of your minutes away. You have to turn the heat on those guys and see who can. Well,
you don't think Arbor Jack is feeling that heat right now? I mean, it's
exactly he for is. Sure. Yeah. 100%. But the more guys that going to be in that position, the harder the competition is. It's going to be. But that's what Struble brought. Yeah. The fact that just Struble, we have not mentioned Hudson and the others. Just the emergence of Struble has turned the heat on Jacky and shook him off his comfort zone. And it's only going to grow over the next few years. Of course, injuries will. It's a funny thing to say, but injuries will happen. Injuries will help. There might be a chance that Gouli might switch a little bit on the right side eventually, or another young defenseman who proves to be just as comfortable on both sides. That's a possibility. But I mean, first and foremost, you have to make sure that you get to put the pressure on those kids, and it's a luxury. That's why I think that it was interesting to put Ylönen and Struble together today, because it's a luxury that they don't have up front this season to put the pressure on guys. But that pool of young defensemen, they'll be able to do that. And same will go for those who are down in Laval. They're going to, you say, okay, well, forget the AHL journeyman or whatever. We're going to give those guys plenty of ice time, but you better make sure that you earn it so you can keep it.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think we're seeing that, the inconsistency of Joshua Roy. The Canadians resisted the temptation to bring him up when he started the season so hot, which was a good thing, because he's had an up and down season. Riley Kidney's obviously not ready for the NHL, but he's shown flashes of what maybe he could become an intriguing possibility at the NHL level. I think he has more work to do to play himself into that conversation. But really, aside from Roy and Heineman, who's with the team right now, but he's more a member of the Laval Rocket than anything else. I mean, those are really the two guys at forward in Laval that have legitimate NHL interest. I mean, could one day Jan Mysak play himself into that conversation? Farrell, maybe. I think there's Farrell, Kidney.
I'd say Farrell more than Mysak or Kidney.
Yeah, I think there's a similar burden of proof for Farrell and Kidney. Listen, both prolific offensive players, both physically slight. I mean, Farrell's a highly intelligent player, but I think there is, and he was playing well before he got hurt. I think there's a lot of burden of proof on those two guys because of the physical limitations that they have. I really do. But yeah, maybe you're right. You're right that Farrell's ahead of them. I mean, he's definitely ahead of Kidney, but there's not, point being that they're not brimming with, they're not overflowing with forward options in Laval, which is kind of the whole point of the whole Ylönen thing. So, but
speaking of which, since we're tipping our toes into prospects, it's Future Friday.
Future Friday.
So,
sorry, I get excited about one of those.
So let's talk about one of those few forwards that the Canadians have in their pipeline. Owen Beck is the only returning player from Team Canada Junior for the upcoming World Junior Championships. and has a chance to be the captain of this team. I'm really interested to see what sort of a role he's going to get. Is he destined to be just a bottom six, even fourth line centerman, and yet be the captain of the team? Is that what it looks like?
That is what it looks like right now, and it's going to be up to Owen Beck to not have that be the case. I think that there's been, I think the Canadians were hoping, and frankly that they've seen it lately, but they were hoping that he would this year, his true World Junior year. Him playing last year was a bonus. Usually it's the 19-year-olds that play in this tournament. He's the only returning. He could be captain, but yeah, I think he's penciled in to a fourth line 2-way role, which can be important, which can allow him to shine. But I think the offensive side of his game is what the Canadians were hoping would be developed. And you look at his last number of games in Peterborough. I'm looking at them right now. He was on a tear offensively when he left for this camp. His last game was December 8th. He had 5 points in his final 2 games. I mean, if you go back 10 or so games, yeah, it's impressive.
So he started the season with 1 goal, no assist in his first 7 games. And in his last 18 games, he scored 15 goals and added 14 assists. So that's 29 points in the 18 games, which if you're a legitimate NHL prospect at 19 years old, that should be your rhythm. But he's maintaining it now. He's at that rhythm. He's Peterborough's top scorer, and the Petes are the team that has scored the least goals in all of the OHL. But he's their leading scorer,
right?
So.
I mean, I think if you really get it down even to the last 12 games, it's really a lot. It's 5, 7, 9, 11, 15, 17, 21 points in 12 games heading into this World Junior camp. So, there's one thing, and actually what Marty said today about Struble, I think applies to Beck. And Beck needs to, his whole comment of you don't want to put young players into a box. Well, Owen Beck's been put into a box. Owen Beck is seen as a low ceiling, high floor, 2-way guy who is going to kill penalties, win faceoffs, and play on your bottom 6 and really solidify your bottom 6, whether that's third or fourth line. But no one looks at him as a potential top 6 player, as an offensive type of player. And it's really on him to prove otherwise. But he's definitely been boxed. His role on Team Canada is clear. You will be our fourth line center. You will take on difficult matchups. You will kill penalties. You will take big faceoffs, and that's important. And we hope, assuming he gets the C, it'll be an important role. And every year on this team, you see kind of high character guys who get that role, and you can instantly see that guy is going to play in the NHL, because it's not a given if you make Team Canada for the World Junior Championships that you're going to play in the NHL. It's just not. The list is way too long to even count how many guys excelled in that tournament and did not have fruitful NHL careers. Owen Beck, I'm convinced, will. But what's interesting to me is will he be able to break out of that box in this tournament? That's what I'd like to see. Like the way he was producing with Peterborough before he left for camp, can he continue that in this tournament? That's going to help him get out of that box.
Yeah, but I mean, he created such a buzz last year in training camp that I think that the expectations from fans also might be a bit too much, because he did produce some offense, and I think he'll have the opportunity, and it's going to be his task to show that he's more than the penciled role that we picture him to fill eventually. But at the same time, the Montreal market should be wise to not also raise the expectations so much that to picture him as being he's going to be our second line center. To me, if he's a third line center, it's already going to be a win, because you have to understand. I mean, if some of those tools are translatable offensively, that's great. But he needs to just have how many times have we talked about having an identity? If this guy remains true to his
Mhm.
identity, he's going to help a hockey team. You mentioned the faceoffs. He's second in the OHL for faceoffs. He's over 63%. That's one thing just right there that can really help you earn some ice
Oh,
time.
100%.
And so it's but I remember in a previous episode I said that his first order of business when he reached the NHL would be to dislodge Jake Evans. Well, if Christian Dvorak's still there, well, that's another target. That's something that he could aspire to be. But is he going to be necessarily better than Christian Dvorak over the course of his career? I don't know. Can he be more exciting? I hope so.
Yeah. Christian Dvorak is vanilla ice cream. It's good. I enjoy vanilla ice cream, but that's Christian Dvorak. Christian Dvorak, you ask anyone who plays with him or against him, there's a lot of respect for his game. But yeah, Owen Beck should aspire to be more than Christian Dvorak. But I mean, Dvorak, if he winds up like something like Christian Dvorak, that wouldn't be bad either. Christian Dvorak, it wouldn't be bad for Owen Beck. Christian Dvorak makes $4.5 million a year. It's like it's not as if he's a
That's right.
failure in the NHL. And he's a useful player. Like he's a very useful player to the Canadians. Would be a useful player if it weren't for his salary. Um, would be a useful player to a competitive team as a third line, two-way face-off winning center. Which is exactly what Owen Beck could become. But if he could be that with a bit more offense, and again, this tournament is an opportunity to show that. Like that's really what I would be looking out for if I was, for Canadians fans watching Beck in this tournament. Let's see if he can show some of those offensive tools and demonstrate that he is not destined to be a fourth line center in the NHL, which I think a lot
Yeah.
of people kind of assume he's sort of on the road to becoming. It's on him to change that, and so we'll see. We'll see if he's able to do that with sort of the assignments he's given and the line mates he's given by in this tournament. But it's the way he's come on offensively in the OHL regular season for the Petes is encouraging. Because I think he was given a mandate by the Canadians to go show us the offensive side of your game. Let's see if we know what you can do
Yeah.
defensively. We know you can win faceoffs. Go show us something we don't know, and he's doing that. So let's see if he can continue
Yeah, and
that.
he's taking it on his shoulders. It's one thing to create, to generate points when you're part of a
Mhm.
powerhouse, but when you're playing for Peterborough and you end up being in the role of the top dog, it's a form of leadership in itself to say, okay, fine, I'm going to be the one that's going to carry the
Yeah,
team. That's what he's been
yeah.
doing.
So good on him. But yeah, it's obviously we've got a couple of weeks before the tournament starts, or not even 11 days before the tournament starts. Not that long. But yeah, aside from Beck, Lane Hudson, as we mentioned, Jacob Fowler on Team USA, Meshar is going to be there for Slovakia. And that's about it. It's a bit of a thin crop for the Canadians this year, but Owen Beck is definitely someone I'm going to keep an eye on whenever Team Canada is playing for sure.
But they have it might be a low number, but each of those guys have a chance to be an impact
Oh,
player on
absolutely,
their team.
100%. Yeah, I mean that's
So they're not just there,
and Fowler's
So
situation
it's
is very intriguing, honestly. Like he's going up against the incumbent starter in Trey Augustine, a guy who was drafted ahead of him, as you
mhm.
mentioned in your piece on him. And so now going into this camp, and I doubt that's going to be settled in camp. Like they'll probably take some of the preliminary games and what have you to sort of decide who's going to get the ball in the medal round. But I think Fowler's in that. Like he's in that fight. Which normally
Oh
when you
yeah,
have a returning starting goaltender at the World Junior Championships, which is rare unto itself, um, whoever the two other goalies on the roster have no chance. But I think yeah, Fowler's got and he obviously has another shot at the World Juniors next year, and so let's see. I mean, that's another intriguing aspect from a Canadian's prospect point of view is what the Team USA goaltending is going to wind up looking like.
oh, I'd love to see him getting the number one job now. That'd be that'd be exciting because when you're, I mean, this is yet another edition where the Americans, I don't know if they're the favorites, but they're going to be a strong
Oh,
team.
dude, I think that I don't know if they're the favorites either, but they're. I was just looking at their power play units the other day, and it's ridiculous. Yeah. It's gross, to quote Jayden Struble. It's gross. There's the amount of offensive talent on that team is quite formidable for sure.
Yeah. All right, man. Let's wrap this up. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. We'll be back on Monday episode. Until then, don't hesitate to send us your questions for Monday Mailbag. You can do so at Basu and Godin. That's on Twitter, or you can write us by email at basuandgodin@gmail.com. Don't hesitate to leave a comment maybe on Apple Podcast. Give us a 5-star rating while you're at it. And and then also find me a hairdresser so I can get a proper haircut.
I got a couple of people I can recommend. I'm not looking that much better, but I just got my haircut. So, I'll be in Winnipeg the next time we record. Lovely, lovely, lovely Winnipeg in December. No better time to visit Winnipeg than December. Final road trip before Christmas. We'll tee that up along with your questions on Monday's episode.